Welcome to Spectral Shadows, where the darkness whispers and the unseen lurks. Tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it? Because horror feels different at night, especially when you're alone. Those who love their mother, like, share, and comment. Subscribe, if you dare. Now turn off the lights, and let's begin. Story number 1. I've tried to leave my office 3 times already. Every time I grip the handle, I'm unable to twist it down and pull open the door. I'm scared of what I might invite in. Scattered around the wheels of my desk chair are scraps of off-white paper. After performing the Rorschach test on the little girl, I couldn't bear the sight of the ink blots. Ink blots that supposedly bear no meaning suddenly looked like all of the things the girl had described to me. Pig heads, animal skins, body parts, and that wasn't even the worst of it. The girl had discerned details about me that she shouldn't know. Couldn't know. For those who aren't aware, the Rorschach test is an exercise we psychologists use to better understand how our patients perceive the world around them, and how the lens of trauma may be warping the vision of their mind's eye. There are 12 cards, with each one depicting a different symmetrical image. These cards are presented to the patient one by one, in order, with the patient being asked what they see. I remember performing a Rorschach on a soldier recently returned from active service in Afghanistan, who had developed recurring nightmares. "What do you see?" I asked after sliding the first card in front of him. His tightly drawn mouth dropped open. Pinched, defensive eyes opened wide. His breathing accelerated. Beads of sweat appeared on his temples. My buddy, Brian, when the smoke cleared, that's what he looked like. God, I could see the dirt of the road right through those holes in his stomach. And those are his entrails. Oh God. It's worth noting that upon seeing the first card in the Rorschach test, common healthy responses are, "Oh, that's a moth," or "That's a pretty little butterfly." Come to think of it, the little girl had started off along those lines this afternoon, except she was most definitely suffering from a disturbance of some kind. That became all too clear as we progressed through the cards. Her name was the final one on my list, and I felt a wave of relief rush through me as I put a tick next to it and walked out into the waiting room. The day was almost over. "Annabella?" I called. A girl was laid on her front, scribbling a series of gray lines onto a notepad, but she didn't stir at the sound of her name, though her mother and grandmother did. They leapt to their feet and gathered their belongings before corralling Annabella towards me. Some tears were shed, but the tantrum wasn't anything out of the ordinary for an 8-year-old being dragged from pillar to post in an unfamiliar place. I showed the trio into my office and confirmed the details of Annabella's referral. Sudden emotional withdrawal, bouts of unresponsiveness, extreme lethargy. Blood tests had come back fine. Brain scan was normal. The conclusion was that the change in her behavior must be psychological. Annabella's mother and grandmother nodded along, paying rapt attention to my every micro-expression. Annabella herself sat on her mother's lap, continuing to scrape dark lines onto a page. I saw a pack of colored pencils poking out of her mother's handbag, but it seemed she was content with a plain graphite one. To better understand how Annabella reasons and thinks, I'd like for her to complete a Rorschach test. You don't have to leave her because I appreciate that may be uncomfortable for you. But it would be best from a clinical perspective if I supervise her alone. This way, I can be totally sure that her answers are coming from an authentic place. Children are very suggestible, you see, and the conclusions I will be able to draw may not be as scientifically valid if Annabella is looking over at both of you every time I ask her a question. To my surprise, the two ladies were quick to agree with my suggestion. If the roles were reversed and I was bringing my daughter for a psychiatric review, I don't think I'd be as quick to let her out of my sight. I sighed as I held the door open for Annabella's mother and grandmother. I supposed they had reached a point of utter desperation in their attempts to restore the girl to her previous self. They reassured Annabella, telling her they'd be just outside, and made their way out into the waiting room. Terse smiles exchanged. I stepped back into my office, allowing the door to swing softly closed. "So, Annabella, how about we play a game?" I asked. No response. She was hunched over her notepad with her back to me. Instead of persisting in trying to get her attention, I walked around to my office chair and wheeled it to a position slightly behind and to the side of her. This seating arrangement was deliberate and employed for the same reasons I had given to Annabella's family. I didn't want to inadvertently influence her responses. I reached across my desk and pulled a folder towards me. Withdrawing the first Rorschach card, I placed it carefully on the desk in front of her. "Annabella, look at this and tell me what you see," I said, softening and deepening my tone of voice. Her eyes flicked up to the card and back to her notepad. "Bat," she said. It was the first time I'd heard her speak. "Very good," I said, and replaced the first card with the second one, anxious that if I wasn't quick enough, then I might lose my momentum with her. "And this one." Annabella glanced at this card for a split second longer, her brows almost twitching together, before she went back to her scribbling. "Blood," she said. I felt my jaw unclench as Annabella's focus drifted again. The second card in the Rorschach test is the first to contain color, and this so-called color shock can induce strong emotional reactions in some subjects. Thankfully, Annabella was unfazed, but it did occur to me that while her answer was a common one in general, it was peculiar for an 8-year-old child to think of blood. I moved on to the third card. Same as the one before. She nodded at me. "Blood." She nodded again. "What about this one?" I placed the fourth card in front of her and watched as she uncoiled from the chair to plant her palms on either side of the image. Her tongue escaped her lips, and she started humming a vague tune. "It's the pig man's face. He's always sitting underneath the slide in the play park." "A pig?" "Not exactly. He's got the body of a man, but he has a pig head. He wears a blue suit, and his tie has little yellow teddy bears on it. Those are his floppy ears, and look, his long, snuffly snout." Annabella stroked her finger along 2 drooping splotches of ink and the central trunk of the image as she spoke. "A man with a pig's head?" I asked uncertainly. "He doesn't have eyes," Annabella said, as if that explained everything. Alarm bells rang silently in my head at her bizarre words. Could this be an abuser? A sick, masked man grooming children in a play park? I made a note and moved on. I'd got her talking now, so I pressed on to see what else she might reveal. Perhaps the man with the pig's head and teddy bear tie was simply an invention, a character in a weird dream. Her eyes followed card number 4 all the way into the folder, and she even waved it goodbye. For cards 5, 6, and 7, her answers were largely the same. Skins. Those are the skins he wears. The man under the slide. Yes, he changes his skin sometimes. Changes it to what? Oh, whatever he likes. Animals, birds, slugs, "Lizards," she said, giggling. Card 8 brings a change of pace to the test, with bright colors making a return. It can also brighten the mood of the exchanges between the person conducting the test and the subject after so much monochrome. I hoped for Annabella's sake that she started to intuit some more conventional things from the remaining cards. Otherwise, my report on her was going to be dour, both to read and to write. Upon seeing the card, Annabella said nothing. She stared at it for a considerable amount of time before turning to me. With her index finger, she drew a line across her neck just beneath the chin, and another one across her midriff. "What do you mean by that, Annabella?" I asked, as her eyes blazed into mine. After a moment, she looked away. I moved on to the next card, and this time she drew the first line across her midriff. The second line she drew was across her thighs. "I don't understand," I said. "Parts of bodies," Annabella whispered. A silence fell as I digested what she'd said. I battled to keep my expression neutral because there was still one more card. I'd upheld the validity of the test to that point, and I didn't want to ruin it now. The last card of the Rorschach test is the busiest of vibrant array of colors and shapes. Most people see a thriving ocean scene full of sea creatures. That was not what Annabella saw last. "Card now, Annabella. You've done so great. Now tell me what you see here." Her gaze flitted between the card and me, and she smiled awkwardly. It was almost a guffaw. Her cheeks flushed, and she wriggled on the seat of her chair. "These are all the pieces of your life that the pig man told me about." "The pig man knows about me." Annabella nodded emphatically. "He's very clever," she said. "What does he know about me?" I asked, and Annabella proceeded to spew out sensitive information. My first, middle, and last names, my mobile number, my home address, my wife's name, the names of my 3 daughters, the town I was born in, my bank details. She knew about my peanut allergy, and that double pepperoni is my favorite pizza topping. She knew about my holiday to Chile in the spring, to visit some Andean vineyards I'd read about in Decanter magazine. She knew the chalk I polished the tips of my pool cues with was lime green. How? The pig man told me. I can ask him how he knows all this stuff the next time I see him. "No, you don't need to do that," I said, quickly packing away my folder and staggering to the door. I told Annabella's mother and grandmother that the girl was being bullied at the park she played at, and that they should avoid it in future. Annabella skipped away, holding her mother's hand, and I retreated back into my office. I'm usually 5 minutes behind my final client, but as I said before, I daren't leave. There's a man with a pig's head and a teddy bear tie who knows everything about me and can apparently change his appearance at will. I know I can't stay here forever, but at least in this room I can be confident that I'm alone. Although what's to say he can't shapeshift into a spider or an ant? What if he's watching me from beneath the skirting board right now? What if he's been watching me for days, weeks, months? How else could he have passed on all that information about me to Annabella? Does he mean me harm? Annabella's words keep coming back to me. Blood, skins, parts of bodies. I think I'll stay here for a little while longer. Just a little while, and then I'll walk out to my car. Yes, but not yet. Not just yet. Story number 2. 2 days ago, I woke up to the sound of something crawling inside the walls. The noise was bone-chilling. I won't lie, I was scared out of my mind. I pressed my ear against the wall and could only hear the same slow dragging sound, like something slithering inch by inch through the dark. My heart was pounding harder and harder. I put in my earplugs and played some music at a low volume, hoping to drown it out and get some sleep. It didn't work. I couldn't sleep. Just the thought of that thing kept me awake. I moved into this cheap, small apartment a week ago. After the divorce, I couldn't afford much, so I settled for this place. It was surprisingly decent for how little it cost. But now I'm starting to realize why it was so cheap. Yesterday, I called the landlord to try to sort this out. The sound was driving me insane, and worse, it was making me genuinely afraid. Mr. Breger, there's something crawling inside the walls. I can't sleep. Could you please send someone to take care of it? Oh, don't worry, it's just rats. Nothing to be scared of, he said. His voice was calm, but I wasn't fooled. He was too calm. Even if they're rats, I'm not exactly thrilled. I don't like rats or anything like that, really. It's not a phobia, but just the thought of those filthy animals crawling around makes my skin crawl. Don't worry, he repeated. They don't do any harm, and they're inside the walls. You won't even see them. It only lasts a day or two. The other tenants said the same thing, and then it stopped. You won't hear anything after that. He was trying to reassure me, but I could already tell this was a dead end. There was no point in arguing. Right after the call, I promised myself, if this didn't stop in the next couple of days, there would be a serious problem. And if Mr. Breger didn't fix it, I would make sure he regretted it. But the more time passed, the more I was convinced that those weren't rats. The sounds had a rhythm, a pattern, almost like a conversation. I was terrified, on the edge of panic, but something kept me from running away, curiosity. I had to know what was inside the walls, and I knew deep down, whatever it was, it couldn't be rats. During the day, I pressed my ear to the wall again, hoping to catch the sounds and understand what I was dealing with. But nothing. The silence was even worse. And when the sounds finally came back, they filled me with something worse than fear, dread. The more I listened, the more anxious I became. The noise made my whole body tense, like every nerve knew something was wrong. Then I realized it didn't sound like crawling anymore. It was something else. Familiar somehow. Now that I was really paying attention, it sounded like words, whispered in some rough, guttural voice, in a language I didn't recognize. That's when I knew something was talking inside the walls. I decided to record the sounds with my phone. I listened to the recordings over and over again, paying close attention, but nothing. Just the same static and scratching. I connected my phone to my laptop and downloaded a free audio editor. I tried everything I could think of. I sped up the playback. Nothing. Slowed it down. Still nothing. I used every enhancement tool I could find to clean up the noise. But again, nothing helped. I was just about to give up when one last idea crossed my mind. What if I reversed the audio? What came out of the speakers made my blood run cold. A distorted voice over and over, whispering, "Run. He will kill you." My whole body froze. I couldn't breathe. Panic, fear, dread, everything hit me at once. I wanted to run without looking back, get as far away as I could. So many strange things had happened in the past 48 hours. And this pushed it over the edge. But I didn't run. I did something else. This morning, first thing, I went to a hardware store and bought a sledgehammer. When I got back to the apartment, I didn't hesitate. I needed to know what was behind that wall. I swung the hammer as hard as I could. Blow after blow, I kept going until the wall began to crumble. And then, from one of the holes I made, something came out. A human arm. I screamed, loud enough to wake the entire building. I couldn't move. I was frozen in place for 5 whole minutes. The longest 5 minutes of my life. My spine felt like ice, my face soaked in cold sweat. Slowly, I stepped closer. It was unmistakably human and unmistakably decomposing. The smell hit me. My stomach turned. I nearly threw up, but I shut my eyes and forced myself to breathe slowly. It was close. Way too close. I dropped the sledgehammer. Didn't even think. I bolted for the door. I wasn't taking clothes, wasn't packing a thing. I just needed to get out. Now. As far from this place as possible. Never come back. But when I opened the door to leave, he was standing there. Mr. Breger, right in front of me, hand raised, about to knock. Oh. I was just about to check in on the rat situation, he said, smiling warmly. Too warmly. Ah. Yeah. They've stopped. Everything's fine now, I stammered, trying to hide the terror in my voice. I kept the door half closed, trying to block his view inside so he wouldn't see the demolished wall. All I wanted was for him to leave so I could escape. But of course, things only got worse from there. The sound from the wall started up again, loud, echoing through the apartment, but somehow, he didn't react at all. It was like he couldn't hear it. "Let me take a look," he said kindly. "Maybe I can help. Other tenants before you have complained about noises, too." "There's no need. The sounds stopped since yesterday. But thanks," I said, trying hard to act like everything was fine, even though the noise in the walls was getting louder by the second. All I wanted was for him to leave. Right then. Right there. "Well, I came all the way over. At least let me have a look," he said, suspicious now. "Come on. Let me in." Before I could stop him, Breger shoved the door open and stepped into the tiny apartment. When his eyes landed on the destroyed wall and the arm sticking out, he froze. Just stood there, staring. I didn't say a word. "So, you found them," he muttered. His voice was low, almost sorrowful, like he didn't want to believe what he was seeing. "What?" I asked, confused. I had no idea what he meant. "You found the other tenants of this apartment," he said, turning to face me. "Every damn one of you complains about the noises in the walls, and I've never heard a thing. I even lived here for a week once. Dead silence. But you people, always hearing things." That's when it hit me. Breger killed the previous tenants. He murdered them and hid their bodies inside the walls. You killed them." The words barely came out. I was in shock. I couldn't believe what I was standing in front of. "Yeah. And now, I'll have to kill you too." Before I could react, he lunged at me and wrapped his hands around my throat. We both crashed to the floor, fists, kicks, elbows, choking. Anything we could throw, we did. The fight was pure chaos. 15 minutes of hell, though it felt like only 5. The adrenaline, the fear, it warped time itself. I'd never thrown a punch in my life. But today I fought like a man possessed, like my life depended on it. Because it did. The fight ended when I managed to grab the sledgehammer. I swung it with everything I had. It smashed into his head. His skull exploded like a watermelon. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I'd never killed anyone before. The feeling was horrible, sickening. The only thing that kept me from completely falling apart was knowing I'd killed a monster. A serial killer. That thought, that I'd stopped him, was the only comfort I had, and even that didn't feel like enough. Then, the sound stopped. Just like that. Silence. I realized then that those sounds were the voices of his victims. They were warning me, telling me to run, begging me to escape. I don't know how that's possible, or why only I could hear them. I'm writing this while I wait for the police. I don't know what's going to happen to me, whether they'll arrest me or believe me. But one thing I do know, no matter what they say on the news, no matter what the headlines scream, you're the only ones who now know the truth about what really happened here. Story number 3. I have a skull in the corner of my office. It sits on a shelf a little above my eye line. It watches me and fills me with great dread. I acquired it at an open-air bazaar in China. If you wish for a street or a city, or some more definite form of location, I'm afraid I cannot give it to you. Already, the memories fuzz around the edges in my head as I try to recall them. But at their center is a clear image I must never forget. So I write this to keep the molder from overtaking the whole. When I was in my 20s, I was fascinated with the world and its variety, bored with school and its routine. I decided to forego my studies and take a more hands-on approach to life. I took the money I had saved for college and started a hitchhiking journey across the globe. I went everywhere: France, Spain, Italy, the Philippines. I even backpacked across India so I could better understand its people and cultures. But the crowning jewel of my travels was China. The Middle Kingdom, as it is sometimes called, fascinated me unlike any other place. Its culture and its history enthralled me. I wanted to know everything about it. It took years to get a tourist visa, but once I was there, I never wanted to leave. I was there for 2 years. In that time, I learned the language, traveled the countryside, and sought to learn everything I could. It was my dream to live there forever. Or if that was impossible, at least die there. But then came the day I wandered into the other market. In a city I cannot now remember, there was a place where the locals gathered together to sell fresh produce and the most delicious street food. An open-air bazaar of sorts. The place was so friendly, so inviting, that I halted my trip entirely so I could stay longer in that beautiful place. While I was there, I chatted with the shopkeepers about their lives and their histories. With their words, they painted a rich tapestry of their culture. And soon I found myself calling many of them friends. They gave me tips on places to visit, good food to try, and on which market stalls sold the best products. I felt safe. I felt home. Then an incident occurred. It was a normal day. I had just purchased some ripe fruit from a familiar stall when I noticed something I had passed over many times before. It was a small side alley in the market, dark and thin, lying between 2 buildings. At a glance, I could see booths on the other side of the passage. I assumed it was another part of the market. Curious, I went closer to get a better look. I crossed the street and approached the opening. As I took my first steps into the gap, a stranger grabbed my arm and forcefully pulled me out. I was frightened. I turned to face my attacker. It was an old man, jowls hanging down to match the length of his abnormally large ears. His face was pockmarked with the remnants of forgotten diseases he had conquered, and his eyebrows grew so thick they hung low across his eyes like fringe. His back was stooped and crooked, yet he walked with no cane. Judging by the hand on my arm, he was stronger than he looked. I expected an altercation, But instead of anger in the stranger's eyes, I saw pure, unadulterated fear. He glanced at the alley, and it was as if he were looking directly into the gaping maw of a bloodlusted shark. His words were scattered and hard to understand, but the stranger managed to communicate that the area was off limits. He kept side-eyeing the alley, edging away from it. Looking around, I noticed that most of the vendors were also giving it a wide berth. No one had set up shop in a 50-foot diameter area around the dark gap. Passers-by crossed the street when they came near it, holding their heads down and shuffling forward at a faster pace. "Do not go." Those were the stranger's parting words. He shuffled away, looking nervously behind him as if the alley were going to pursue him. I took him at his word, at first. But even with the new fear I felt toward this strange passage, another feeling grew: curiosity. Each time I returned, my fascination grew. It was like a fungus on my brain. At first, it was just double glances as I walked past. Then I began to think about the alley, even when I was not there. Once the fear of it had subsided, I often stood across the street from it and tried to peer through to the other side. What was over there? I tried to ask my new friends about the alley. Each time I did, it felt like the air itself froze in place. Without hesitation, they each told me the same thing: do not go through it. One person, How Young. I pressed a little harder for information. He sold fresh fruit, his specialty being peaches. I had gotten especially close to him over my stay there. "Why?" I asked. "Why should I not go over there? Isn't it part of the market?" How Young tried his best to explain, but to me, his words still felt cryptic. He told me the alley was the only way to get into that section of the city, a place he called the other market. He was right about that. In my own investigations, I had tried several times to find other openings, other paths into that section of stalls, but came up with nothing. The alley was the only one. How Young went on to further explain that while there were people that did go inside on occasion, each time they did, they came back. Different. "There's nothing good over there," he said. "It's not worth it." Despite his warnings, my fascination grew. I was drawn to that alley, staring at it for hours and hours. My curiosity started feeling more like hunger. Many days I would strain my neck trying to see what was happening on the other side. I just needed a glimpse, I told myself, and then I would be satisfied. One day I got my glimpse. I was yet again staring at that damned alleyway. The impulse to explore overtook me like a fever. It crept down my body and made me tremble with the desire. Emboldened by the feeling, I checked my surroundings for a moment. It was a busy day at the market. Everyone was preoccupied. No one was watching. Now was my chance. I made my way across the street and slid my way into the gap. It was colder than I expected in the alley. It had been a warm day, but I felt a chill as if I were passing through the deep shadow of a glacier. In the darkness, the sound of the world behind me became muffled. The street market hubbub faded to a dull murmur, then a whisper, then silence. When I had pushed through fully, it was as if the street outside no longer existed. I was in the other market. A tented booth was in the way when I got out of the alley. I moved my way around and got onto the street. My first observation: it was almost a mirror copy of the other bazaar. The same placement of booths, the same distance between vendors, even the same colors on the tents. But it wasn't entirely the same. There was something off. It was deserted of shoppers. I was the only customer there. Shopkeepers manned each booth, but they were the only other human beings in the whole place. Each stall sold a dizzying variety of goods, but it wasn't produce. Their shelves and stands were full of other strange items. Knives, dolls, symbols written on ragged material I couldn't identify. Across the surface of the nearest table were bones and devices with purposes I could not begin to understand. I was so taken by the goods that it took me a moment to notice the shopkeepers. All of them were smiling widely and focused directly on me. It was like each individual shop owner was standing ready for my business and my business alone. I reasoned that since I was the only shopper on the street, that made sense. But the more they looked at me, the more uneasy I became. Their smiles were empty, the kind you give for an extra % of gratuity. The kindness was transactional, and they were waiting for my side of the exchange. My curiosity had been sated. The feelings of danger were returning. I wanted to leave. Now. It took a moment for me to find the tent I had emerged behind. I went behind it, looking for the alley entrance so I could return to my home turf, filled with safety, friends, and food. When I looked where the alley had been, it took a moment to process what I was seeing. My heart sank into my stomach. It was gone. Where there had been a gap in the buildings, there was now a solid wall. It was like the buildings themselves had drawn together, closing the gap. You couldn't have stuck a knife in it. The crack was so tight. I looked up and down, hoping I had just misremembered the alley's placement. I hadn't. In my ever-frantic searching, I could find no openings of any kind. After combing over the block twice, the sun was getting low in the sky. I was desperate. I pushed through my discomfort and went to a booth owner. I asked how to get out of this market section. "Buy something," the woman said, her teeth glinting in the red glow of the sunset. Not sure how this was supposed to help me. I looked at the table and tried to find the cheapest-looking item. I picked up a small die with strange symbols painted on it in midnight black ink. I asked about its price. 1 leg. I was sure I hadn't heard her right. I asked again and she responded the same. 1 leg. In the corner of the tent, I saw a dadao, a sort of Chinese machete. A horrifying realization dawned on me. The concept seemed so absurd, so unreal, but the owner confirmed my suspicions when she grasped the blade's handle and turned back to face me. "Would you like to pay now?" I quickly set down the die and backed away. The owner made no move to follow me. They just kept smiling and informed me they had many other goods to choose from, and they were open to negotiating price. I went to several other booths and asked for directions on how I could leave. All said the same thing: buy something. Each time I tried to select an item, the brutal prices were given with the same nonchalant attitude as the first. An eye, a hand, my genitals. They said this casually, as if they were simply speaking of different cash denominations. The sun had fallen by this point, and the sky was dark. It hung over me, a black expanse like a smothering blanket. There were no stars to tell direction. There was no moon. The only illumination came from the glare of the torches lighting up the wares and the twinkle of candles coming from the windows. The silence of the night was deafening. At any crowded street market, there is always a dull murmur of noise, an underlying layer that a patron may stand on to know that they are not alone. There is always some transaction, some exchange being made, and quiet is never allowed to linger long. That rule did not apply here. Soundlessness reigned. I could not even hear the breaths of the individual shopkeepers. I don't know if they even did breathe. They stared ahead at me, waiting. My purchase, it seemed, was the only thing that mattered. I started to panic. I began to try every method of escape. I ran up the length of the street, but just when I thought I had made a good distance from my starting point, I would find myself back where I had begun. I tried all the doors to the building, but they were locked. I went crazy with fear and tried to bash the wooden slats in with the heel of my foot. When I was finished, they still stood, resolute and unmarked. No longer caring for safety or propriety, I began to scale the sides of the buildings. My fingers scrabbled to find any foothold or handhold that would move me upwards. My fingers caught in the crevices, and at one point my fingernail was pulled out of my flesh by a jutting nail. I continued on, ignoring my bleeding finger. I had to get out. I needed to get out. Nothing else mattered. I managed to get to the roof. I stood atop it and saw the market on the other side. My market. My heart soared. My friends, my regular haunts. They were waiting down there and beckoning to me, like sirens. And I, a sailor with a death wish. I quickly made my way down to the other side. When I dislodged from the wall and turned to face my freedom, my blood went cold. Instead of my friends, I saw those same strange booths, those strange perverse shopkeepers smiling and waving, all waiting for me to buy. I was back. I had never really left. It was weeks before I broke down and bought something. Time became strange in the quiet. It passed like a fevered dream. I lived off the fetid pools in the gutter and caught rats that had the misfortune of being trapped in there with me. I ate their flesh raw, unable to purchase the fire starters sold 2 booths over from my makeshift hovel. It would have cost me my tongue to purchase, after all. I couldn't part with that. At some point, the rats ran out, and the water dried up. I began to starve. I could see the bones in my forearms, and the constant gnawing of hunger began to drive me insane. I counted my ribs to pass the time. It was in my lowest that I had a sudden moment of clarity. It was the middle of the day, and the sun was beating me about the head with its heat. I had resorted to drinking my own urine, which had taken on a dark brown cast. It smelled foul. My mind was fractured, but one coherent thought shot through me, unifying the pieces for a moment. It was as if someone had spoken directly into my ear. I was going to die. I was going to die unless I bought something. The bargaining began. I went up the length of the street, shuffling on malnourished legs. It was painful, but it was possible. I greeted shopkeepers and began to haggle. I tried my earlier strategy of choosing cheap-looking items, but found that looks were deceiving. These often were the most expensive. One small handkerchief would have cost me all 4 of my limbs. I tallied up the cost of all the items, trying to determine what I was willing to lose so I could leave this place. The shop owners would not be talked down. If they wanted an arm, they might settle for a forearm, but never a hand. If they wanted a leg, a foot would never do. 5 fingers might become 4, but never 1. That was when I found a miracle. I found the skull. It looked like it could have belonged to some undiscovered species of monkey. That, or it was a human skull deformed beyond all comprehension. I had felt its gaze on me as I began my journey from booth to booth, trying to barter for my escape from this hell. Its presence had unnerved me so much that I had passed it over on my first journey up and down the street. On my second go-through, I reluctantly asked its price. 1 finger. The shopkeeper pointed upwards with his index. Ironically, I felt excitement. I had found it. The cheapest item. Its price was still steep. Had it been at the beginning of my stay at the other market, I would have balked at paying. But with starvation comes context, and a finger began to feel like a bargain. I almost agreed to the trade on the spot, but I made the mistake of looking at the skull again. Its empty sockets felt like two holes of unfathomable depth. As I looked, I imagined myself falling into them until my body and soul were dissolved in the perpetual night. I hated it. Even in my weakened state, I wanted nothing to do with that skull. But my third journey up and down the street made me so dizzy I had to sit down. I was running out of time. I went to the booth and agreed to the skull's price. I held my hand on the table and closed my eyes. I braced for the impact of the dadao. When nothing came, I opened them again. The shopkeeper had their hand extended, the handle of the blade facing towards me. The message was clear. I took the dadao and went about planning the best way to remove my finger. I considered a single chop, but I wanted to limit the damage done to the rest of my hand. I couldn't get the right angle from that vantage. Besides, I needed to do the chopping with my offhand. When I had gone to take the index finger from my left, the shopkeeper had shaken their head. Other hand, the right one. It took an hour, but I eventually settled on a course of action. I took a deep breath and pulled my index finger back in a sharp jerk. The pain reached me before the snap. I bit into my tongue, tasting fresh blood, as I made sure there was a break in the bone by jerking my finger back and forth. The burning in my hand was white hot, and I felt the broken ends of bone grating against each other. I screamed into my closed mouth, trying to muffle the sound. Hoping that my adrenaline would keep me going, I took the dadao and began sawing. Blood soaked out through the break in my skin and smothered the length of the blade. The weapon was sharp, but not razor. I pushed and pulled to help the blade sever the skin, muscle, and tissue, the last things keeping my finger on my hand and me in this wretched place. At one point, the blade caught on a tendon, and I felt it rip from its supports in my hand, pulling out in a white string that dangled and jumped. I swallowed down bile and kept going. I had to finish. One final pull, and the finger pulled off from my hand in a spurt of blood. I threw it down on the counter and shoved my hand into my armpit. I needed to get out of here, and then maybe I could find a doctor who could stop the bleeding. The shopkeeper took their time, examining the finger, going over it again and again. At one point, they took out a jeweler's glass and examined the severed end. I saw spots, and I dry heaved. After 2 long minutes, the shopkeeper nodded. My offering was satisfactory. He extended the skull to me. "I don't want it," I told him. He just shook his head at me. "You buy it. You take it." I didn't have time to argue. I was an inch away from passing out from pain and blood loss. I took the skull in my good hand and shambled away. Somehow, I knew where to go. I made my way up the street. I found the tent where I had emerged from the alley that all felt like an eon ago. I held my breath, praying the shopkeepers had not lied to me. My heart leapt. There was the alley, open. I could see the markets on the other side. I went as fast as I could to it. Afraid I would blink and the alley would close, I threw my body into the slit and pushed forward with force. I kept waiting for some sort of resistance, some force to keep me in the other market. It never came. In a burst of speed, I left the alley. I was bombarded with a blast of people, shouting, haggling, and complaining about subpar product. I was back. It might have been the joy at escaping, or it might have been that my ears had grown accustomed to the silence of the other market. regardless in my starved and broken state. It was all too much. My eyes rolled back into my head, and I collapsed in the mud. I awoke 2 days later in a small hospital. Hao Yang was sitting next to me. Apparently, despite my weeks inside the other market, no time had passed in the outside world. Hao Yang remembered seeing me eyeing the alley, and the next moment saw me emerging with my bloodied hand, looking half crazed and starved out of my mind. He knew what had happened immediately. He was the one who brought me to the hospital. On my bedside table was the skull. Hao Yang refused to touch it. He sat himself on the other side of the bed and tried his best never to look at it. He refused to speak of the skull or the bazaar when I began asking questions. Once he was sure I was recovering, he stopped showing up at the hospital. I think we frightened him, the skull and I. After being discharged, things changed. People avoided me, crossing the road at my approach. People that were normally friendly became nervous in my presence. The market, once a friendly place, now felt cold. No one talked to me unless I first addressed them. No one even looked at me if they could help it. Ironically, the only welcoming part of the market was the alley. It was always there, waiting, almost beckoning me to step through again. In those moments, I tried to remember what the other market had put me through. But it didn't stop the curiosity from digging into my mind like a bad itch. 2 weeks after leaving the hospital, I decided to go back to America. I had acquired no souvenirs on my world-exploring trip. I didn't have room for them, but the skull followed me home. I tried to leave it in 3 separate hotel rooms. Each time it would appear again in my bag, nestled comfortably in my clothes and watching me from the depths of my suitcase. On the boat home, I tossed it into the ocean. That night, when I came to my bunk, it was on my bedspread. A few drops of salt water graced its cranium like a perverted aspersion. It stared up at me with those empty sockets, and I could feel something inside me withering. I stopped trying to get rid of it. It was better to just ignore it. Ignore the decay, ignore the rot. Just let it stay and fester and hope that one day time will take it from you. When I returned, it found a new home on my office shelf. It must like it there because it doesn't move around as much. It's been years since then, years that I purchased with my finger at the other market. But even still, I am not free. My time is running out. I finally discovered the true price of the skull, the fine print I passed over in my haste to pay the low price. The doctors are calling it early onset Alzheimer's. I know better. Memories run together now in my head, like wet paint splashed over my cortex. I no longer remember Spain, France, the Philippines. Even now, I strain under the gaze of the skull to remember Hao Yang's face, the taste of fresh peaches at his market stall. The skull has left me only with my time at the other market, untouched. But I know it will take that too, in time. It will take all of me. Maybe if I hadn't been so stingy. Maybe if my survival had been worth an arm or a leg. Maybe then I wouldn't be paying the dividends. But it's too late now. A final bit of advice from a man senile by his own hand. Don't be cheap. It will cost you. Story number 4. I've always been a drifter. I backpacked across India at 22, lived off-grid in British Columbia at 25, and by 30, I'd landed a house-sitting gig in Arizona. Quiet town, dry air, free rent. All I had to do was keep the plants watered and make sure the solar generator stayed topped off. The house belonged to a woman named Sabine. She was a spiritualist, big on energy fields, sound baths, and star being communication. Her home was exactly what you'd expect. Desert crystals on every windowsill, pyramids made of copper wire, hieroglyphs printed on silk tapestries. It looked like a cross between a yoga studio and an Egyptian burial chamber. I didn't think anything of it at first. I found a handwritten note tucked into a drawer. If Ra opens the sky tonight, do not acknowledge him. Close your eyes. Let Ma'at judge your heart. I thought it was a poem, probably something Sabine wrote high on mushrooms. But that night, the sky did something I've never seen before. A beam of golden light, like a spotlight, but wrong. It had this undulating quality, as if it were breathing. I stared up, half asleep, and I swear to God, I saw an eye inside it. The next morning I told myself I dreamt it. Things started to go missing. Not valuables, symbolic things. The feather from Sabine's Ma'at altar, gone. Her little statue of Thoth, shattered. Her third eye oil, spilled in the shape of an ankh. I Googled the symbols, ancient Egyptian, yeah. But she'd layered them with new age stuff. Chakras, starseed maps, even crop circle interpretations. It was like she'd built a hybrid religion around rebirth, judgment, and visitors. Ones from beyond the veil of light. I heard music at 3:13 a.m., not playing, humming. Like 1,000 voices, off tune, humming through the floorboards. I followed it to the garage. There was a door behind the water heater I hadn't noticed before. Behind it, stairs. The humming got louder as I descended. The basement wasn't a basement. It was a chamber, a shrine. Walls painted with black sun discs, scarabs with human eyes, and chakras pierced by golden beams. Candles circled a raised dais on which stood a glass sarcophagus. Inside was Sabine, or at least something that looked like her. She was floating, eyes open, smiling faintly. There was no water, yet her hair floated around her face like she was underwater. Above her hung a copper pyramid frame, buzzing. A voice entered my mind, like a whisper scraped across stone. Do you submit to Ma'at? Is your heart light enough to walk in Ra's shadow? I ran. I booked a motel that night. The next morning I drove back to grab my stuff and leave for good. The house was gone. Just a blackened patch of desert, like nothing had ever been there. I went to the town sheriff. He said no one named Sabine ever lived in that area. Showed me county records. No such house. No deed. No permit. Nothing. But I know what I saw. I still hear the humming sometimes, especially around 3:13 a.m. And sometimes I wake up with sand on my feet and a copper triangle pressed into my palm. If you ever see a woman in robes, standing in a copper circle, whispering about aligning the stars within, run. It's not Reiki. It's judgment. And if your heart isn't light enough, they'll find you anyway. Story number 5. All right, so I know if I just jumped right into what I need to say, you'd think I was crazy, and just click off. My phone battery's mostly full, so I have time to type out an explanation. Time. Yeah, I have plenty of that. Hopefully this goes through and gets seen by someone, anyone, who can help me. I guess I should start from the beginning. This may be the last anyone ever hears from me for some time. So I come from a broken home life. Originally, we were totally nuclear, until our lives went nuclear. Mom and Dad had a messy divorce, and my mom, getting full custody, took me and my younger brother from nowhere, Illinois, to Ireland. She said something about wanting to get away from a toxic environment. I don't know. All I do know is that at 14 years old, I was in a new house, in a new country, with a new culture, just trying to get my bearings. Luckily enough, if there's one thing Mai and my brother loved, it was exploring. There's plenty of forested hills out in Ireland, and with no predators like bears or wolves, my mom was okay with us going out to explore the local creek. I think she was dealing with a lot at the time. It gave her peace of mind to sit in that silent house, not having to deal with two uprooted kids. So me and my brother James would go out and spend hours in the woods, playing pretend, making maps, climbing trees, and when it'd grow dark, we would make our way back home, planning out the next day's adventure. That first summer, before school started for us, was one of those memories that you look back at as an adult when you realize how good you had it. Unfortunately, those were the last memories I have like that from my childhood. I didn't have a hard time making friends in school, but it still felt awkward, being the new kid with a weird accent. James was having a harder time. He was an imaginative kid, maybe a little too imaginative, which probably weirded out some of his peers. When I would go with my friends to hang out after school, James would join me, our mother insisting I take him along. I had no problems with it. My relationship with James was good, and we generally weren't at each other's throats like most siblings would be. I think it's because we both realized that besides Mom, we really only had each other after the move. My friends would always be hesitant when I wanted to go hang out in the woods. Come to think of it, looking back, we'd rarely encounter any kids while we played in the forest. At most, maybe a few hikers. But that's it. It makes sense to me now, but at the time I couldn't understand why. It took a lot of prying before one of my friends, while we were playing video games, in a hushed tone, gave his reasoning on why they avoid the woods. "The Fey King, dude. It's bad news," Sean hissed, like saying those words were enough to trigger a calamity. I remember looking at him stupefied. "The faking? Faking what?" I asked. He just rolled his eyes. "Nah, dude, not faking. Fey King." Sean spaced it out, like fairies and stuff. He mumbled, "Fairies? Dude, get real. Just be honest and say you saw a body in there once or something." "Shut up. I'm serious. People get lost in the woods. My mom knew a person who tried to find the Fey King when she was little. She said the words and walked into the forest and never came out." "Words?" I raised my eyebrow at him. He nodded. Yeah. You go to a spot in the woods, say a few words, and that should be it." He didn't look like he wanted to go into any more detail than that. "Why the hell would anyone do that? Why do people play the Bloody Mary game, dude? I don't know." I shrugged, realizing in that context, I guess it made sense. It's a thing young kids do to scare each other when there's not much else around to do. It's not just idiots who try to call him in, either. Sometimes people say he appears to anyone who gets lost in the woods. It's either take a chance with the Fey King or die in the woods. So yeah, the woods suck. He turned his attention back to the game, showing he was done with this conversation. That night, sharing what I learned with James was my biggest mistake. James was a big fan of cryptids, Mothman, Nessie, Braxy, all of them. To learn that there's a cryptid he's never heard of, basically right in his backyard, he had a million questions. What does he look like? What does he do? What are the words? Me not being able to answer any of those questions didn't quell his newfound curiosity. It just encouraged him to find them on his own. The next couple of weeks, he would come to me with his findings, interspersed randomly. Sarah at school says he looks like a man with red hair. Hey, Tim, Mike says he plays games. Whatever James was able to learn from classmates, much to their reluctance to talk to him, and adults willing to talk about it, there was one thing no one would tell him: the words. No one would crack on what the words were, and it was eating at him. Whenever I would hang out with my friends and James would tag along, he would get annoying, pestering them about the words, since they were technically ground zero of where I learned about the Fae King. My friends, Sean, Liam, Brianna, normally tolerated James, but with this new obsession of his, I could tell they were getting annoyed with him. Come on, guys, please. What's the words? Are they bad words? Is that why you won't tell? James was especially whiny that day. We tried our best to ignore James, focusing on the screen of the arcade cabinet at the local arcade. To call it an arcade was generous. It didn't have much inside, but neither did our town, so you make do. Sean, why'd you have to blab about some stupid fairy tale to Tim? Brianna punched Sean's shoulder, causing him to flinch. Because the nutter always wants to hang out in the woods. Sean rubbed where's Brianna hit him. So you don't believe it, Brianna? I have to admit, with James's insistence, I was becoming more interested myself. There was a pause before her response. Course not. Her eyes flicked to me for a moment before back to the screen. Just a legend to stop kids from hurting themselves in the woods. James saw his opportunity. So then just tell me the words, and I'll stop pestering. Before Brianna could retort, she was cut off by Liam. Brianna, just tell him the damn words already, so he can shut up about it. Fine, she huffed. She walked off for a moment, returning with a napkin, words scribbled on it. James was ready to snatch it out of her hand. Slow down. She held the napkin up higher than he could reach. Listen to me. You don't say these words out loud. Not here, not in the words, not anywhere. You got it? She doesn't just look to James. She also looked to me, as if knowing I was going to need to intervene and stop James from making a dumb decision. Even though I don't believe it, people act weird when this guy's brought up. Don't be a pain. She lowered the napkin down, and James grabbed it. I leaned over his shoulder to read the words myself. By Lonesome Stump, in Forest Clear, the King of Fae is there to stay. Tap 3 times, he will appear. The King of Fae will come to play. James wouldn't look away from the paper. His eyes scanned the lines, reading them over and over, as if afraid they would disappear off the paper if he looked away. My friends seemed pleased, James no longer being a nuisance, and so we returned our focus to making sure we had enough quarters to make it to the end of the game. Soon enough, it was time to head home. James finally spoke up as we walked back to the house. I know where he is. His voice came out gently, almost like I had imagined it. What? The Fae King. I know where he is. The rhyme. We've been there before. I thought back to the rhyme on the note scribbled in his hand, his fist clenching tightly on the napkin. A stump, alone, in a clearing in the forest. I had remembered. We did come across that in the forest near our house. It's a strange enough sight to stick out. You really think that's where the rhyme is talking about? I raised an eyebrow at James. He nodded fervently. Maybe we could. I cut him off. Nope. Slow down there, Chief. You got your words. You promised to not be annoying about it anymore. You're not going there. I made sure there was a finality in my words, to deter him. He had seemed to drop it. Over the next week or so, James seemed to have returned to his normal self. I should have realized it was ridiculous for him to drop something he was obsessing over so quickly, but I was just a teenager at the time. I woke up that Saturday morning to see our window open, and my brother nowhere in sight. I left the house as fast as I could. If I hurry, I thought, I could get to him before he could reach that clearing. I wasn't fast enough. He was already there, sitting on the stump. "James, are you crazy?" I screamed at him, entering the clearing. "What's wrong with you? You could have gotten hurt out here, coming out yourself." James just shook his head. "I'm fine. Besides, I knew you would have said no if I asked you to come out here. Because it's stupid, James. Mom doesn't even know we're out here. Come on, let's go back. By lonesome stump in forest clear." As he spoke, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. "James, cut it out. Enough." I moved forward to close the distance. "The King of Fae is there to stay." He didn't waver. "Knock it off. I'm warning you," I yelled. He didn't flinch. "Tap 3 times. He will appear. Knock, knock, knock." His fist tapped the stump he was sitting on. There was a rustle in the leaves that stopped me in my tracks. "James, the King of Fae will come to play." He said those final words, making direct eye contact with me. I remember both of us holding our breaths, waiting for a leprechaun to pop out of the bushes. Seconds pass. Nothing. I exhaled, closing the distance and grabbing my brother roughly by the hand. "Idiot. See? You got all worked up for nothing." I pulled him from that stump, with a death grip around his wrist. "Home. Now." Tears welled up at the corners of his eyes. I'm sorry, Tim. I turned to stare daggers at him. "Just what, huh? Wanted to get whisked away into the forest? To leave Mom worried sick?" No. I just thought," he sniffled. "I just thought that if I met the Fae King and played with him, I would have a cool story to tell people, and they'd want to talk to me." His voice was so little, dwarfed by the silence of the trees around us. I sheathed my eye daggers, loosening my grip. "Yeah, well, maybe we can build a fort or something soon. That'd probably be a cool thing to invite people to, right?" I felt like a jerk. James only nodded. It was around this time that our conversation had died down. During this lull was when I noticed something wrong. The silence of the trees. It was morning. The forest should be a myriad of chirps and whistles. It was dead silent. The only sound was the wind in the trees and the occasional snap of a branch. I quickened my pace through the forest. There should have been a path that led right out of the woods. The clearing. We were back at the clearing. It was impossible. We didn't turn once. We've been in these woods dozens of times. There's no way we could have gotten mixed up. I thought at the time that maybe I was so focused on scolding James, then comforting him, that I wasn't paying attention to where we were going. The puzzled look on James's face, however, told me he was just as surprised as I was. We pushed forward, both of us now focused on making sure we got out of the woods. Then we heard it, a singular bird cry. The noise made my blood run cold. It was very clearly not a bird, but someone trying to sound like a bird. "Cuckoo." James's eyes grew wide, looking up at me. "Tim," he squeaked. "Move." We broke into a jog, moving fast enough without getting caught on a root or thick underbrush. No matter how far we moved, though, the bird call kept equidistant from us, always behind us. "Cuckoo, cuckoo." We moved faster. I could hear James sobbing as we ran, but I didn't want to turn my head. I was afraid to look anywhere but straight ahead. I didn't want to know if I could see what was making the noise. Cuckoo. Was that one closer? Cuckoo. I was sure of it. It's getting closer. Whatever it is, it was moving in. Ahead of us, the trees grew more sparse. We were almost there. Cuckoo. My lungs were on fire. My legs scraped up from the branches. I pushed myself into the clearing, where there was a stump. We were back to the clearing. This time, we weren't alone. On the stump stood a well-dressed man with bright red hair. Cuckoo. His chuckle fluttered through the air like a maple leaf. Hello to you boys. You called? He waited for an answer. Well, step up then. Let's have us a chat. The man on the stump beckoned us closer. He was wearing a fine vest and tailored pants, the color of the leaves around us, and it seemed to shimmer faintly of gold etchings when the sun caught him just right. Sir, I felt my body trembling. Tut tut, Your Highness will do you just fine. His smile was clearly trying to be disarming, but it only further made me nauseous, as if I was looking at the corpse of a loved one. James spoke up, stammering. Your Highness? The Fey King? He stepped closer. The man beamed, motioning towards himself. In the flesh. You must be James. His eyes swept to me. And you must be Tim. A delight to meet you both. Now, I don't often get much people willing to play with me. Foreign folk, too. This really is a treat. It took me too long to realize both me and James were walking forward as we listened to him talk. Too late did I snap out of it, standing in front of the stump. Delicately, the man stepped off the stump, between us both. Now then, surely you're here to play, right? I do love a good game. He placed a hand on each of our shoulders. Actually, Your Highness, meeting you was such an honor, but our mom might be worried sick about us. My mind was a mess, trying to figure out what to say to the man that smelled like fresh rain, with a hint of decayed fruit. The Fey King simply shook his head. Nonsense, Tim. You both made it all the way out here to my home. You even knocked upon my door. He took his arms off of us and tapped on the stump. The least I could do is entertain my guests. Now, any preference of game? I knew this was a trick of some sort. Fairies are known for their love to fool and mess with humans in cosmic ways. I had to think of a game that we could have an advantage, something that could give us a chance to get out of here. Hide and seek, James piped up. My heart dropped. I wish I could have talked to him about what his plan was. I wish I knew what he was thinking. The Fey King smiled warmly at James. Top choice, James. One of my favorites. And since you suggested it, I insist that you be the first to hide. He snapped his fingers. James was gone. He was there one moment, and the next, gone. James, I cried out. Easy there, sport. The Fey King cooed, his words like honey. There was a faint buzz to his words as well, like a swarm of bees. James is fine. He's simply hiding. You, my friend, are seeking. That's how the game works. He sat on the stump. My panic was setting in, my heart racing. Fret not. There will be no time limit to your game. Take as much time as you need to find him. I am also a fair man. I will give you a clue. He cleared his throat. I've dropped my ring. Where could it be? The same place that James is, you'll see. So find the ring and yell, he's here, and your little brother shall reappear. Your ring? I shouted, looking around at the floor wildly. What ring? What do you... He was gone, too. I was alone. I tried to calm myself down. This isn't so bad. I can do this. I find a ring, call out, "He's here," and then the game is over. The man was well dressed. His ring has got to be ornate and stand out somewhere. I immediately took to searching, scouring the forest floor for a glint, something sparkling. Seconds turned to minutes, turned to hours. At least, I think it was hours. The sun was locked overhead. I was hungry, but not starving. I was tired, but not exhausted. I began working on autopilot, analyzing every grass blade, leaf, and flower I could find, desperate to find this ring. My memory gets fuzzy at this point. My mother told me it was 2 days before they found me in the woods. I was dirty, my eyes sunken in, and I just kept muttering, "Where's the ring? He's here," over and over again. When I came to in a hospital bed, it was a barrage of questions, from my mother, from the doctor, from the police. I tried to answer their questions. What was I supposed to say? That a fairy hid my brother by a ring? My mother was torn apart. It was rare to see her smile from that point on. It was about a week that the town conducted community sweeps through the forest before they called it off. The funeral was the worst part. Not many people attended, and those that did would just stare at me. Maybe they thought I killed him. Maybe they actually knew what we really did out there, and that was worse. Maybe James was still in the woods somewhere, in the place where food and sleep don't seem to matter much. I checked every moment I could. The words didn't work anymore. I tried every time I was in those woods to call the Fey King back. Nothing. I'll never forget the conversation I had with my mother after weeks of searching. She was waiting for me at the dinner table. "You've got to stop." She stared at her own hands, unable to bring her face to look at me. "I'm not hurting anybody. He's still out there." I brushed off her warning. "Tim, he's still out there. I know it, Mom. If I could just..." She stood up, slamming her fists on the table. "Enough, Tim. Enough." Her body shook in mournful sobs. "I know you two were just playing out there. I don't blame you." She lied. "But please, I've already lost one of my boys. I'm losing my other one. You've got to stop." I remember sitting down with her and just hugging her as she sobbed. I cried, too. The next week, I had started therapy. I had plenty of time to do so. It wasn't like I was hanging out with my friends anymore. I was very quickly ostracized after the disappearance of my brother. I would see my friends across the school, and they would just shake their heads and walk away. Their eyes said it all. You didn't listen. It took years of work with my therapist to rationalize that some terrible yet normal event happened in those woods, and that all of the Fey King stuff was just my way of disassociating. James must have fell and hit his head on something, fell from a tree, ate something poisonous. I snapped and created some otherworldly story to avoid the reality that sometimes bad things happen to innocent people. Sometimes the game of life determines the losers, even when they don't realize they're playing. Once I was old enough to move out, I did so. I wanted to start a new life somewhere, anywhere else, where I wouldn't be looked at with an equal mix of pity and disgust. It was cowardly to leave my mother alone like that, but I just couldn't take it anymore. I moved back to the States, worked odd jobs to make ends meet in a garbage apartment, stayed indoors mostly, never hiked in the woods again. I lived a life no one would be envious of. Just after my 32nd birthday, I got a notice that my mother had passed away. She had died peacefully in her home. Neighbors only knew after days because of the smell. I had to return home to bury my mother, next to the empty plot where a gravestone stood for my brother. I was a mess during the flight, the pit in my stomach growing as I got closer to what I ran away from. I don't know if it was lucky or unlucky, I guess, that I came across an interesting post as I was scrolling on my phone on the plane. Some photography post of a forest, tall trees, sunlight glittering through the leaves, and a circle of mushrooms on the ground. One of the comments iced my veins, lurched my stomach. Whoa, a fairy ring. So cool. A ring. There's no way. I immediately looked it up. A group of mushrooms in a circle is known as a fairy ring. I tried to think back to what my therapist said, calm myself, recite my mantras. Just a normal accident. But a part of me that I thought died just rose from the grave. What if he's still there? What if he's been there the whole time, waiting for me? What if I can see him again? What if's spewed from my brain, seeping into my core? By the landing of the flight, I was a frenzied mess of fresh grief and new hope. I reached my childhood home, the stretch of woods behind it looming, not a tree out of place. For the last time, I went in, pain seeped in my ribcage when I found myself in the clearing again. A dull ache, like your anxiety is physically telling you that there's nothing but bad memories here. Standing next to the stump, I dry heaved. Shakily, I said the words. By lonesome stump, in forest clear, the King of Fae is there to stay. Tap 3 times, he will appear. The King of Fae will come to play. The bird's song stopped. I was listening for it this time. The forest grew quiet. I knew he wasn't going to appear. It didn't matter. I knew where my brother was this time. My feet carried me through the underbrush while my mind went a million different directions. It was some time later that I found it, in a dense part of the forest, under a large, gnarled oak tree, was a perfect fairy ring. I stepped into the mushroom circle and rasped, "He's here." A beat of silence. Slowly, the oak in front of me shuddered. A seam, the size of a small door, slowly etched its way through the bark, like an invisible force was carving it open. Once the seam connected to itself, the door swung open, and there, sitting with his knees to his chest, was my brother, exactly like I last saw him all of those years ago. He hadn't aged a day. I fell to my knees. James, it's me, Tim." I couldn't stop my body from shaking, the tears from flowing. He climbed out of the tree. "Tim, what happened?" He was clearly startled by my change in appearance. I had so much to tell him. How great it was to see him again. The vindication that I wasn't crazy. The horror of all that he's missed. What that would mean for him. I wish I had the time to tell him any of it. Our reunion was cut short by a man clapping just behind me. Well, when I said no time limit, I didn't think you'd take this much time, Timmy, my lad. I recognized that voice anywhere. It was the voice I convinced myself I never heard. I found him. Please, let us go. I whipped my head around to the Fey King. He simply shook his head, his smile never faltering. "Oh, come now, Tim. That's hardly fair to your brother. It's your turn to hide." He snapped his fingers. I don't know where I am now, or how long it's been. The walls around me are made of solid wood. If this message reaches anyone in the outside world, I beg you, if you see a lost young boy in the woods, looking for his brother, ask him what the riddle was. Help him. Help me. Story number 6. I won't beat around the bush. My ex was a monster. Yes, she lied and manipulated me, And sometimes she treated me like downright garbage. But that's not what I mean. My ex-girlfriend is a witch. Literally. I know. That's nothing too out of the ordinary. After all, there's plenty of people with strong roots to witchcraft, and some who actively practice it. For the most part, those aren't the kind of people I'm referring to. They don't have powers. Not real powers, at least. Sadie could put them all to shame without so much as lifting her pinky finger. That's part of why I stayed with her for so long. I didn't have a choice, and even now I'm suffering the consequences from it. That's why I need to get this out there. I need help, and the police aren't going to be able to provide it. I've dug myself into a hole. No, not a hole. A trench, and I need to scramble out of it before it's too late. Look, I don't think I'll be able to make it this Friday. I have family plans, I said, avoiding Sadie's gaze. I could feel her emerald eyes dancing across my face, studying me, analyzing my movements for a tell. Oh, really? All night? Michael, you know the importance of a full moon. I sighed. She'd caught me. No, not all night. We'll probably be done around 10. I didn't have family plans, and Sadie knew it. She gave me one last stern glance before going back to doing her makeup. Be here at 9:30, please. I really don't want to be late again. I cursed myself for being so spineless the whole drive to Sadie's cabin. I didn't know it at the time, but that woman had a spell over me. One that made it nearly impossible to refuse her. Still, I couldn't help feeling useless. As I pulled into the lot, I took a deep breath and tried to smooth out any wrinkles in my suit. Sadie lives in the forest on the outskirts of town. Strange, yes, but there was something oddly enchanting about it. It fit her, but it's not the only reason she stays there. Babe, I'm here, I said as I let myself in the front door. Oh, hi. A young red-haired girl stood from the couch and extended a hand. My name's Allie. I've heard a lot about you. I took note of the tremble in her hand and the quiver in her voice as I subdued the urge to furrow my brows. I accepted her handshake, lightly so as not to frighten her more than she already was. Pleasure's all mine. No need to be timid. I'm probably not as bad as Sadie says I am. Not so much as a giggle. Tough crowd. No, she hasn't said anything bad about you, I promise. Sweetheart, are you scaring my guest? Please be kind to her. She's new to this. Sadie called from her bedroom. Don't worry, I'm playing nice, I retorted, turning back to the terrified girl before me. Her eyes were wide as saucers, staring at me as if she was a deer in headlights. Just then, Sadie emerged from her room, saving me from the awkward interaction. Well, how do I look? She asked, spinning to show off her black dress. Stunning, I replied, my mouth falling open. It was true. Sadie looked beautiful. Not only did her dress look great, but her makeup was immaculate, and her pale skin seemed to glow in the dim light. Her eyes glimmered. Sadie knew that she looked good, and she reveled in the attention. We should get going, she said, head held high. We'll need a bit of time to prepare. Allie glanced at her, then back to me. I shrugged, following my girlfriend out the door. As we began to walk down a path that led further into the forest, I tugged Sadie's hand. Hey, can I talk to you about something? Allie, you go ahead. We'll catch up. Sadie pursed her lips, presumably already aware of where the conversation was headed. Once Allie was out of earshot, I hissed, Who the hell is she? That girl can't be older than 16. She doesn't need to be here for this. Sadie's eyes flickered with vague annoyance. She's a family friend. Her bloodline has been associated with the occult for centuries. She shot me a glare before continuing forward. I wanted to press for more information, but something told me that I would not be a happy camper if I did. So that left me with no choice but to trot and catch up to the pair of women stalking along the trail before me. The tension in the air was palpable as we walked. I didn't fully know what the night had in store for us. I had assisted with Sadie's moon rituals before, but each one differed from the last. And to top it all off, this was the first time she'd asked me to dress up. That alone told me that this night was going to be special. A short time later, we found ourselves at a clearing. It was familiar to me, but it felt more ominous than usual, more foreboding. It was as if the forest was trying to warn me. At the edge of the tree line opposite us sat a decaying storage shed. Sadie and I continued toward it, Allie in tow. The moon shone down on us as we walked, illuminating our path, its glow radiant among the stars. My heart rate began to gradually increase as I approached the door to the broken-down hut. This was how it always went. I'd have to help Sadie drag some poor, barely conscious martyr out of the tiny shed, then prepare them for the ritual. That's why, when the door swung open and I was met with the sight of an empty space, my brows furrowed. "Babe, where is the sacrifice? They didn't escape, did they?" I asked, turning to face her. Behind my girlfriend, I noticed that Allie was trembling harder than ever. I locked eyes with Sadie, whose lips had parted into a knowing grin. My blood turned to ice as the dots connected in my head. The suit, Allie, the empty shed, it all made perfect sense. "Michael, we've been dating for long enough that I think it's time to initiate you. I love you, and I want you to experience what it's like to have power. Think of it as a gift. Sadie, please. I don't want this. I don't want to be—" "Shh," she said, reaching toward me. "Go to sleep." Sadie gently pressed 2 fingers against my forehead, and then, before I could protest further, the world went black. The next thing I remember was opening my eyes to find myself staring at a ceiling, one that I recognized. As my senses slowly returned, I realized that I was lying in Sadie's bed. "Oh, good. You're awake." I snapped my head in her direction, slower than I would have liked. I felt groggy and weighed down, like I was underwater. "What did you do to me?" I croaked, struggling to get the words out. Before she could respond, a voice that was not my own erupted from my mouth. "What did she do to you? You mean, what did she do to us? I didn't ask for any of this, either." My mind was reeling, failing to process what had just happened. A deep voice had spoken using my mouth. I didn't black out or feel control of my body shift to another entity. It was as if something was sharing the driver's seat with me, something that I didn't welcome in. Sadie frowned. The ritual was unsuccessful. Allie passed out halfway through, the poor thing. I'm still trying to find a way to reverse it. I'm sorry, Michael. Zoros is going to take up residence with you for a while. Story number 7. Hi, my name is Lita. I'm 16 years old, and for the last month and a half, my sister Ellen has been sending me strange messages over text. The messages weren't too strange at first, just some dark jokes here and there. I didn't think too much about it at the time, but then they started becoming more and more common in Ellen's texts. She eventually started sending news articles about people just having horrific things done to them. I started becoming concerned since this was really out of character for her, and I told her so, but she just responded with, "You need to see this to understand." I was kind of weirded out by this response, but whatever, I guess. This week, however, The messages started to get really out of hand as Ellen started sending videos and photos, people being killed in horrific ways that just looked way too real to be fake. I'm not going to go into detail about what the videos and photos showed, as just thinking about it makes me sick. I asked Ellen why the hell she is sending me these photos and videos of what is basically gore, and why she was looking at that stuff in the first place. You know what her response was? I don't know. Why are you upset by this? What the actual hell? After that message, she continued to send me more and more of these videos. I asked her to stop sending me this fucked up stuff, time after time. But of course, she didn't stop. The only responses from her would, no, you need to see this so you'll understand. I honestly started thinking she hated me, or had some weird-ass addiction to gore, because there was really no other reason to be doing this. Not knowing what else to do, I went to my mom and told her about this. She was reasonably freaked out and tried to get a hold of my sister, but she couldn't. So she called her husband and explained the situation to him, to which his response was, that's weird. I'll try and talk to her about it. At this point, my mom asked me to block her, as she didn't want me seeing those videos anymore. But I couldn't block my sister. I loved her after all, and it was clear she wasn't doing all right. I convinced my mom to take me to her house so we could check on her. When we got to her house, we knocked on the door, but there was no response. We waited a few minutes before knocking again. Still no response. Eventually, my mom knocked on the door while saying, Ellen, it's me and Lita. Are you home? We waited a few more minutes and were about to go when the door opened and Ellen was there to greet us. Hi, guys, Ellen said meekly while looking down, clearly avoiding eye contact with us. Sorry to leave you two hanging like that. Don't worry about it, Mom said, while embracing her as tightly as possible. Ellen led us inside, and we all sat down in the living room. I expected her house to be at least a little messy, but it was clean. It was so clean that the place hardly looked like it had been lived in. At the very least, I expected Ellen to look a little rough, but she looked fine and well put together as always. I think you know why we're here, darling, Mom said while fidgeting with her hands. No, I don't, Ellen responded, looking genuinely confused. The videos and photos you've been sending me, Ellen, I blurted out. What videos? Ellen looked even more confused. The videos of those awful things happening to people. Ellen laughed when I said that. What? Her voice darkened when she said that Mom chimed in, stopping Ellen from derailing the conversation. Ellen, we're all very worried about you and we love you, but something here isn't right. You shouldn't looking, let alone sending those videos to your sister. I have no idea what you're talking about. Ellen looked even more puzzled than before. I pulled out my phone and went to our text conversation and showed her what she'd sent me. You honestly don't know what I'm talking about, I said, harsher than I meant to. Ellen's face went pale as she scrolled through the messages. No. I swear to God, I didn't send these to you. My God, I wouldn't even look at this stuff myself. Ellen paused for a moment before continuing. Lita, I don't know who sent you this, but I swear, it wasn't me. What do you mean, was phone number hacked or something? Mom asked with hopeful relief in her eyes. I guess my number was hacked, and I somehow didn't know. My God, I'm sorry that you had to see all that, Lita. If I'd only known sooner. Ellen, it's okay. It's not your fault, I said, as a wave of relief came over me. Mom, Ellen, and I hugged it out, and Ellen changed her phone number. We stayed for a little longer to make sure Ellen was all right. But while on the drive home, I couldn't help but think about the many inconsistencies in my sister's story of being hacked. Why didn't she hear about what was happening from her husband after my mom called him? Wouldn't she have gotten my messages of me asking her why she was sending me all these horrific things? And why did she not answer my mom's calls? I pushed these thoughts away as we drove home. It was all figured out after all, and there was no reason to harp on it. Over the next few days, everything went back to the way it was. I went to school, talked to my sister now and then, and just enjoyed life. Well, that was until yesterday when I checked my messages, and somehow Ellen's old phone number showed up with a new message. You need to see this so you can understand. Story number 8. All right, anyone have something like this happen to them? So the other night, I get back to my apartment after another lousy shift, and there's a freaking letter addressed to me on my bed. Not in the stack of bills piled up under the mail slot, on my mattress. Looked like it came out of a fantasy story. Fancy wax seal on the envelope and everything. I asked the landlady if the security cameras covering my hallway recorded anyone breaking in, but it just caught that punk from 4F making out with his latest girlfriend. All my windows were still locked from the inside when I checked. Creeped me the hell out. I didn't open the letter for a few days. Figured if someone was playing a prank on me, they'd out themselves if I didn't bring it up for a while. But I got curious, and a few hours ago I popped the seal and read it. Here's what it said. Dearest nephew, if you're hearing this, it means my long life has finally come to an end, and now, the family estate, it's yours. You're the one I must pass it on to. Being a single man in his youth with few social obligations, you're the prime candidate to undergo this venture. Just imagine it. Your own private island with a lavish mansion, breathtaking scenery, full amenities, even Wi-Fi, and never having to work another day in your life. And all you have to do to leave the dreary world of the 9-5 wage slave is pack your bags. But I think I'm getting ahead of things. Allow me to introduce myself. You have never met me, but I am your father's great Uncle Stanley, your grandmother Constance's cousin. Given my less than respectable lifestyle in my youth, and my disappearance 60 years ago, it would be no surprise if the memory of me had been conveniently deputed under the rug. I gather my life before undertaking this lifelong vacation bears similarity to yours. I kept to myself with little social interaction, had disinterest in work and studies, and had nothing to occupy my time but my vices. And much like yourself and those before me, I was in my early 20s when I got a letter from a forgotten relative with the deal of a lifetime. Since then, my entire life has been spent in luxury and peaceful isolation. I kept up to date with the outside world through newspapers, television, and the internet. Supplies arrive regularly at the dock, and I have never found myself wanting. I enjoyed many hobbies such as fishing, swimming, gardening, island chores, and even did a spot of writing. Now, as I feel my age catching up to me, I must pass along this paradise and prepare its new tenant, or should I say, caretaker, for what awaits you should you choose to take up this offer. For while your life here will be luxurious, nothing is free, and there are a few simple responsibilities you must keep tabs on. That, and living in isolation, means you must be aware of any and all hazards, so as not to find yourself caught with the proverbial thumb up your keister. Don't worry, our family has been enjoying this island for generations, and through over 3 centuries of trial and error, we have this place figured out to a T. The mansion's library will have all you could want to know about this place's history, and rules of upkeep. And I will write several more cheat sheets to help you with the more nuanced tasks. But for the sake of brevity, this letter will just get you up to speed on the process of getting you settled on your arrival. Should you accept the responsibility, a car will pick you up at first light the day after you open and read this letter. You'll know it when you see it. Don't ask how it knows to come. Just be ready at the curb with your belongings. Don't leave anything behind you want to lose, as you won't be coming back. From there, you will be driven to port, where your driver will point out the ship waiting to take you to your new home. The crew will load your belongings. Under no circumstances are you to offer to help them, but do be sure to thank them for their services. They're persnickety about these things. And besides, you're about to begin a new life of leisure. No point in throwing all that away by becoming the newest member of the crew. Once on board, the trip will take 4 days. Do not worry if you have a tendency towards seasickness. The helmsman is sure, and the ride is smooth no matter the weather. However, while you are allowed full access to the ship during the day, it is imperative that at night you stay on the top deck. Under no circumstances should you venture below deck at night, regardless of threats of impending storms, as the crew is restless and the moonlight's protection won't reach below. Instead, spend your nights at the forward top deck, near the ship's figurehead, and sleep during the day in the shade. Also, while the cook is a surly individual, he has a jovial nature at heart, and his cooking is immaculate. But whatever you do, don't ask for seconds, and politely decline the gumbo. Long pig may sound delicious, but believe me when I say it is one culinary venture you don't want to take. When you arrive at the island, the crew will unload your belongings into a golf cart with a storage trunk parked near the dock for your convenience. It is now safe to assist them if you so desire. Be sure to thank them again for their services and wish them well. Shake the captain's hand, but do not do so with the helmsman. Stay at the dock and watch until they sail out of sight. If you happen to see the ship capsize, check the mooring post on your right. If the time matches what was carved into the wood, then there is nothing to worry about. If it doesn't, note the time for later, then begin making your way along the path to the mansion up the hill. You should reach the house well before sundown. Try not to get distracted with the scenery. There'll be time enough for that later. The front door should be unlocked, but when you first arrive, pass it up and, instead, park the cart to the right of the mansion by the greenhouse. You can leave your belongings there. They will be moved to your quarters that night after you familiarize yourself with the house a bit. The door closest to the greenhouse opens into the kitchen. If the ship that brought you here went under at a time other than what was carved on the mooring post, write it down on the clipboard hanging next to the sink. Feel free to grab a light snack from the fridge if you're feeling peckish, but be sure to save room for dinner. Then walk through the green door which opens into the dining hall. The tables will be set, and all but one of the chairs will be pushed in. Leave this chair out and the half-eaten food in front of it untouched. It is the custodian's seat, and he will return to his meal after he brings in your belongings later in the night. From the dining hall, you will walk into the main foyer. Take your time to appreciate the marble staircase and see if you can make out the faint impressions left by feet from 3 centuries of our family treading up and down them. Make your way up to the 3rd floor landing and take a right. The opulent door at the end of the hall is the master bedroom, but do not enter, as the custodian sleeps there between tenants and values his privacy. Instead, politely knock 3 times and announce that you are the new occupant and will be requiring him to return to his assigned quarters by the morning. Then, return downstairs to the dining hall, where your own dinner will be waiting for you at the main table. After dinner, be sure to stack your plates and utensils neatly. You want to make a good impression with the custodian. Then, return to the foyer and go through the large green double doors on the other side of the mansion. This is the library, where you will spend the night while the custodian readies your room and gets you settled in. The armchair by the fireplace is quite comfortable, and in my recent years, I find myself comfortably sleeping here more than the master bedroom. While there is an extensive collection of books, I guess that you'll be more interested in the small paper taped to the underside of the coffee table with the Wi-Fi password. However, I would advise you read the letter I will leave in the large green book on the writing desk. It will entail how to proceed with your first day as the island's caretaker, as getting a feel for these things ahead of time helps. By 9:45 p.m., close and lock all locks on the double doors, and check to ensure the window locks are in place and not loose. A small screwdriver is in the left drawer of the writing desk if they need to be tightened. Then, get comfortable and spend the rest of the night here. Ignore any noises coming from the hallway. The custodian will be using the front door throughout the night, so expect to hear it opening several times. If you need to use the bathroom, there is one on the other side of the blue door to the right of the fireplace. There's a small case with reusable earplugs on the mantelpiece. I would advise you use them this first night, as the local wildlife tends to get vocal after 10 o'clock p.m., and while most are harmless, their calls can be unsettling for those unaccustomed to them. On that same note, if you hear your name in the night, do not respond or react in any way. Just don't. Trust me, it's not worth it. And that should cover your first night on the island. You will be awoken in the morning with 3 knocks on the double doors. This is the custodian letting you know he has finished transferring your belongings to the master bedroom. He will not enter the mansion again except for the scheduled cleaning days. From there, refer to my aforementioned letter in the green book for everything you'll need to know about officially becoming caretaker of the island and all it entails. I do hope you'll take this chance of a lifetime, but the choice is, of course, yours. Regardless of your decision, I hope this letter found you well and that you will continue to have a pleasant life. Sincerely, Great Uncle Stanley. I still had the login for the family tree service my grandmother got for us before her passing. And sure enough, I did have a great Uncle Stanley, although there was next to nothing about him other than his name. While it could be, and probably is, a scam, I gotta admit, it's not like I've got a lot to lose. My job sucks ass, and I've had to sell most of my belongings just to cover the rent in this glorified storage unit of an apartment. I haven't been close with most of my family in years, not since I was falsely accused of SA in high school because the popular girl was bored. Same incident, lost me the few friends I had, so my social circle is non-existent too. I only have a small backpack, but it can fit what few clothes and possessions I have easily enough. Honestly, I'm at the point where I'll try anything over this dead-end life I'm living now. I've got my stuff out on my mattress ready to be packed and let my boss know I won't be in for a few days. I'm going to wait outside tomorrow for the car to pick me up. If you don't hear from me in a week, they probably took my kidneys or something. I'll post again when and if I can. Wish me luck. Story number 9. I crouch by my child's bed for the 3rd night, face on the blankets, weeping. Another day of begging the police for updates and getting none. Of putting up posters, of spreading the word on Facebook, and still no news. The last of my hope is starting to drain from me. What kind of mother can't look after her own child? Suddenly, I hear something clear its throat. Surprised, my head jolts up, wiping the tears from my eyes. I look around until I see something that makes me scream. Some kind of baby-faced doll head is poking out from under the bed and looking directly at me. I think rationally, it must just be a toy. My vision is still blurry, so I'm not seeing it right. I go to rub my eyes again, but then it speaks. About your child, it says. I need your help. Acting purely on animal instinct, I stand up and run to my room. Shuffling through my nightstand, I grab my gun and stand there with my back against the wall, trying to figure out what to do. Do I hide here or go back to Andy's room? An answer is given to me as the doll head extends itself from my own bed, and I see that it's attached to some kind of stalk. There's no need to be afraid. I'm Andy's friend. I shoot, but I miss, putting a hole in my floor. The head retracts back under the bed. Okay, I see you're disturbed. Adults' minds aren't as flexible as children's, so this reaction is expected. Would you be more comfortable if I talked under here? I crouch down and try to see under the bed, starting to regain some calm. I left my phone in the other room and the light switch is on the opposite wall, so only the dim light from the hallway illuminates. Whatever it is, all I can see is some kind of amorphous shape and the faint outline of the doll's head. Like I said, I'm Andy's friend. I was quite disturbed when he didn't come to bed 2 nights ago. Normally I'd find him at a friend's house, but I couldn't find him anywhere. I returned here to hear you talking to the police, and that's when I knew something was wrong. Finally managing to speak, I stammer, "What are you?" That's not really important right now, but let's just say I'm a protector. Unfortunately, my influence is limited to the undersides of beds. A protector. Are you saying you can help me find Andy? Not quite. Actually, I've already found him. I just can't get him out. I spring to my feet, ready for action. Where? Tell me where to go. Unfortunately, I can't tell you where it is in terms of your world's geography. In terms of what? I can't guide you there, but I can take you there. My head is spinning. How can you do that? Well, you'll have to join me under here and allow me to envelop you. I'm not sure what that means exactly, but it sounds terrible. I don't know if I really trust this thing, but it's the only lead I've got. If you can really do that, let me get my phone. Of course. I go to the other room and grab my phone from the nightstand. As I do, I look down and see the doll head watching me once more from Andy's bed. I crouch down, aiming my phone at this creature, and go to turn the flashlight on. I wouldn't do that, it says. I think it will make your journey more distressing if you do. I'm not sure if that's really true. Wouldn't it be better to at least know what I'm working with here? I consider turning it on anyway, but decide that it doesn't really matter. When I get under that bed, it's either going to kill me or take me to Andy. Knowing what it looks like won't change that. You should hurry. I'm not sure how much longer it will be safe. I'd recommend to close your eyes and crawl under the bed and let me take it from there. I follow its instructions. At first, I lay under the bed, not feeling anything. Then a warmth starts to envelop me, but not a pleasant one. I feel like I'm being covered in fresh, raw meat. It squeezes itself all around me, even smothering my face, and for a terrifying several seconds, I'm unable to breathe. Then it retreats, and I find myself no longer laying on the carpet, but on hard concrete. I look around, but can't see anything. Of course, it's dark. The creature is nowhere to be seen. I turn my flashlight on, exposing a bare concrete floor. I crawl out, and my heart drops as I see Andy lying on the metallic cot. He seems unharmed, but he's tied up, blindfolded, and gagged. "Andy," I whisper scream. I almost normal screamed, but decide against it, not knowing if the person who did this is nearby. I get to work untying him while trying to comfort him. "Mom's here for you. Everything will be okay now, I promise." Even after ungagging him, he's silent, most likely too terrified or traumatized to speak. I hug him tight for a few seconds and then get back into action. Finally, not focused completely on my own son, I look around the room. It's a large room, perhaps an abandoned workshop of some kind, and there are other children tied up similarly. Quickly, I take some pictures, as well as a screenshot of my location on my map app, and text them all to the police. I start to untie the next closest child, but then I hear footsteps coming from outside, getting closer to the room. I think to the gun still in my pocket, but don't want to risk anything, especially with Andy here. For all I know, it's multiple people coming, and they could all have guns too, and would probably be a better shot than I am. I crouch back down under the bed. "Psst, thing. Get us out of here." No reply. Not knowing what else to do, I grab Andy and pull us both under the bed. I hear the metal door screech open, and several men enter the room. The lights come on, and I hear one of them say, "Hey, one of the kids is missing." They start getting closer, and I know the cot doesn't provide much cover. I grip the gun in my hands. Luckily, I don't need to use it, as I feel the warmth start spreading itself across my back again. "Apologies," the thing whispers, but provides no explanation for its tardiness after another disgusting transport. Andy and I are back on our warm carpet. I hold him close and sob, and feel the warmth lay itself on both our shoulders in an apparent attempt at comfort. I tuck Andy into his bed, and it's not long before the police call me, asking how I got into that building and how I even found it in the first place. I'm unable to give them a proper answer, but I don't care right now. I'm just overwhelmed with joy to have Andy back. Not getting any information from me, they let me know they'll be conducting a raid shortly, but I'll have to do a better job answering questions when a cop arrives at my door in a few minutes. Unbothered, I simply say, "Okay," and lay in bed with my child, spending as much time here as I can until I have to go face the consequences. As I lay there with him, the doll head rises above the edge of the bed, and its smile seems wider than before. You survived, for now, but the shadows aren't done with you yet. If this story gave you chills like the video, share it with someone who dares to watch and comment your thoughts, especially if you're watching in the dark. Subscribe to Spectral Shadows, where fear never sleeps, and the next nightmare is always waiting. We'll be watching.